And we're live. Are we live? Are we live? We should be live. Is my mic okay? Is my mic okay? Are
Hang
we
on a minute.
coming through?
Let me just. Yeah,
Oh
I'm
yeah,
alive.
Simos is alive. Simos is alive. Good
Okay,
to see.
good
Yeah.
news.
Tonight, I want to say thank you to everybody who's coming. Always back to the pigsty and stuff. Massive thank you to Michael. Simos, as always, thank you to Mike for Simos for coming on. But tonight, I am a little excited. Tonight, I'm also a wee bit nervous because we've got people who know what they're talking about. Hopefully,
Well,
and let me blow smoke up your ass for a minute before you let everybody know. But philosophy, physics, and stuff like that. If anyone's been following me, know that it's joys, it's enjoyments. There's things that I love, and they would be part of them. And we have Michael here tonight, who, if I get this right, Michael, a PhD candidate working on the history of science. But you have a personal interest in the philosophy of time and the debate with Einstein and Bergson.
yeah, it's I don't even know what I'm working on myself sometimes. So it's actually in the philosophy of science, but what I do is more historical in nature, focused on early 20th century. So history, philosophy of science. It's same thing for me.
Some people would shoot you because you've
I
conflated
know.
them.
That's fine.
But yeah, we have Michael on. Michael reached out to me, wanted to have a chat. We were hoping to have Michael on last week, but if anyone who's doing renovations to their house knows, when you go home and you find the contractors and you're like, this isn't right. Yes, Mr. Willis, the bot is now on. Okay, there you go. You can dick punch people. So, yeah. There's nothing else. We'll chat for a wee minute or so, and then we'll open the panel up to a few other people. But we're going to start with just the three of us, and it's something that I did. Am I hanging on YouTube? Oh no. Something I did mention on Twitter, you sort of teased us a wee bit, Michael, was a question that I asked, right? It was sort of more of a joke question because of the format that Twitter is and stuff like, but it was to get the conversation going. And the question stands: if every atom in the universe all stopped vibrating at the exact same moment, we'll not use the word time, but if every atom in the universe all stopped vibrating at that particular moment, would you consider time to be moving forward in the increment where nothing is moving or vibrating? Or do you consider time to be the movement of, could you define time as well as a part question? What would be your definition? But as the first one, if everything in the universe stopped vibrating, would you consider time to be moving?
Oh boy. That's a hell of a first question. Um, you know, I think like any good philosopher, I would start off by saying, I don't know. But if I had to give a guess,
We're gonna push
what's
you. We're gonna push you. We
that's
want an
right.
answer.
That's fine. That's fine. I get it. So my big qualm or hang up or issues with a lot of questions like this. Just go ahead and start off with some good philosophical jargon for everybody. Is that it's really really difficult to talk about time without using temporal language. And when you start using temporal language, it leads very quickly. It can lead very quickly to uh, a lot of confusion and to sometimes some kind of basic misunderstandings. And I see this a lot, especially in my conversations with theists who want to make arguments about like the beginning of the universe and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. But with your question specifically, um, I would say that it. So here's the hang up of why I can't really answer that question. When we talk about time, we're immediately faced with a really big problem that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, and a lot of people are still trying to wrap their head around. And this is the problem that the picture of time as presented by physics is fundamentally different from our most basic intuitive understanding of time. So, from our perspective, from a let's say like a biological perspective, um, time seems to proceed in a kind of a linear fashion. I was born in 1986. I had a childhood. I grew up. I went to high school, went to college, yada yada. You could trace the time of my life along a kind of a linear pattern, and it seems to be progressing towards the future. I remember my past. My past happened. I'm currently in the present moment talking with you all, and I'm going to have a future. But physics tells us that the universe, at its most basic fundamental level is timeless.
Mhm.
And so all of those tenses that I just said is at odds with that sort of granular understanding. So would time stop? I mean, in a sense, yes, but the question itself is treating time as a thing, as a substance,
Yes, yes.
right? It's attributing a thingness to time that time doesn't have.
Yeah,
So
the
to not
mathematics.
answer your
Yeah,
question, yeah.
the mathematics work the same no matter whether you're going this way or that way. You can take time out
Mm.
of them, and the equations still work. So physically, time shouldn't. Well, time doesn't matter, so to speak. But I can see where you're going with that. The idea of giving it a physical nature and stuff. And it's all relative. That's where it is. Depending on your time, it's all relative. Depending on where the gravity is, it's all relative. GPS has to reset itself, or would end up going over the fucking bridge at the river. It's one of those things that happen. Simos, I'll throw the question to you as well. From a more and shit. Yeah, I know you have obviously a science background and a philosophical background as well. So would you agree with Michael? Don't do that. That's not fun. Or would you have another opinion? Or another, just on that
Yeah,
really
well,
simple question.
sure. Okay. Yeah, I don't really have a philosophical background other than what I've personally read and tried to pick up. So that's the first thing I'd say.
Years of
A science
experience
background.
then.
Yeah. Likewise, I'm a good philosopher in the fact that I know I'm not a philosopher. Yeah, that's deep. That's deep
That
right there.
sounded really deep.
Yeah, didn't it? Yeah,
That's the
I
girth.
can pass out the
That's
bullshit
the girth.
when I need to. But no, I would certainly agree with what Michael said there in that on the quantum level, time isn't really an existing thing at local in what's called locality. It's not really a thing. But of course we don't exist in that framework as humans. We are classical entities or beings, and therefore we are affected by time in that way. And of course, if every atom stopped vibrating, then there would be no light for a start. There would be, there would be no second law of thermodynamics, and there would be no life. So, in what respect time is applicable to that, I have no idea. I don't think it is applicable. So in that sense, no, time would stop in our classical world if everything stopped moving in the universe. We are reliant upon the vibrations of atoms, and in some sense, even Newton's theory of gravity, the classical theory of gravity, relies upon that because, of course, it is assumed or shown by Newton, I should say, that everything is moving as a state of default. In its default state, everything moves. So therefore, you're basically saying, what if the classical world wasn't classical? Well, then it would be quantum, and that would be the only thing left, and there would be no time. So that would be my kind of answer to dodge the question as well.
No, it's a very more fleshed out version than what I would usually get. People would just go very, very quick and go, well, if nothing's moving, there's no time. And then some people would go to the point where, how do you realize that nothing's moving unless you're an outside observer? And then you're secondary to time. But from your point of view, in the classical sense, the universe could stop and start again 20 times and in this next hour relative to us, and we wouldn't know, because from our point of view, if everything did stop moving and then started again, we wouldn't notice the difference because we are part of that time rather than an outside observer.
Yeah, I mean, it's even worse than that, to be honest. But that's true because the way the mind works, right? In my theory, as it were, not my personal theory, but the one that I've ascertained, is that consciousness really is a reflection of reality, not a representation. So we have our data senses that come into our brain processes it, and then in hindsight we put it together into consciousness to make sense of the world around us. That doesn't happen immediately, that happens after. So I mean, we're always slightly behind reality in that sense.
And I would build off of that to say, because that reminded me of something, and I'll try not to get too bogged down in the the history of the development of this sort of thinking, though. But what makes it even more complicated and convoluted is that, so for example, philosophers like Henry Bergson, who I spent a lot of time reading, and his predecessor, Gaston Bachelard, have this really big debate about time and memory. And they're kind of writing at the advent of the 20th century, where psychology is just becoming its own discipline. And one of the things that these early studies in psychology start to show is that our memory of the past is not like when we there's a common analogy comparing the brain to a computer, right? And so when you save a file on the computer, it saves the file exactly how you left it. But that's not how our brain works, and that's not how memory works. So oftentimes what will happen in the chronology of our past is our brain will save little snippets, little memories, little experiences, the sights and the taste and the smells that we had. But as time goes on, it starts to kind of jumble it all together. And so kind of to build off what Simos, to build off what Simos was saying, even our recollection of time, I think it would be a mistake to draw out that computer analogy further, because how we remember things and how our memory operates is not the same way that it operates like with the computer. It's very fluid and dynamic.
More like an old filing system rather than a computer. From what I've seen and read and watched and stuff on memory, we remember our emotions stronger than we remember our physical memory. So as you say, as time gets further on, it gets pushed further and further back and less important. And if you work in an office, you've got that big folder for your day's projects. It gets smaller because you don't need as much. And by the time that it's moved to the very back folder, all you need is what it cost you, what you had to do, what the end product was, and you put the rest of the information together off that, like our brain does with our emotions and stuff. It's becomes the actual memories, the physical screenshots, so to speak, become less important, more so than the feelings and what we experienced through that, rather than the actual physical memory of it. And as you say, it all becomes jumbled up. You had a memory of running through a field, and then your mother cooked cake. Every time she cooks cake, you think of the field, and then they get jumbled together with smells, and it all becomes that one big story.
Yeah, I mean, I would add one more thing. I think I can't remember where I read this. I don't even know if it's true, but I'll say it anyway. Which is that when you remember something, you don't remember the time that it happened. You remember the last time you remembered it. And so every time you remember it, there's chances that small deviations will occur, and a little bit of that jumbling will happen, and then you actually remember the jumbling as being the original thing, right? So you're never remembering the original circumstance, just the last time you actually put it together yourself to remember what the initial feeling was. But time, is that because we don't understand what time is? Is it because it's not real? I don't know whether that's the case, right? Memory is by default unreliable in that sense, especially when we consider an objective world. But I noticed that in chat, MathPig, there's a couple of interesting questions. I don't know if you wanted to just
go for them, man. If you were reading them, I was just I was letting everybody finish their points and stuff. We'll get a few points out, and then I'm gonna open the chat up as well, let other folk in.
Okay. Any thoughts on the possibility of a mirror universe running in the other direction in time, backwards to us?
Red Dwarf did it perfectly.
You want to start us off?
Okay, let's start it off. I mean, there's nothing in the classical laws which say that there is a direction in time. But when you get to the quantum mechanical laws, the second dynamic, thermodynamics tell you that there is a direction of time. So no, there's nothing inherently in the laws of physics or that say that the universe couldn't run backwards, and it would just be putting things together, other than when you get down to quantum mechanics. And then, of course, you're fighting this arrow of time, which is kind of generated in our minds by thermodynamics. So
Slipped in the
That would
back
be
room.
my best guess.
Look at this.
Yeah,
buddy
yeah,
slipping in
it's
the back
Fabio.
door.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Let me introduce Fabio. He's an expert Italian.
Yeah. Michael, if I can, just sort of what I said at the start was like a sub question. What would you define time as?
Oh, I think St. Augustine had a good quip about this, and I can't remember exactly how it goes, but time is that which, when I'm not thinking about it, I know exactly what it is, and when somebody asks me a question about what time is, I can't answer it. I think time...
Sounds like a theistic dodge to me.
All right. It's a good dodge. I think what time is a use. I think, again, to go back to this kind of arbitrary distinction that I've made at the beginning between physical time, time as talked about in physics, and then time as we experience it. Time as we experience is nothing more than just the order that things happen in. Nothing too fancy there, right? And time in physics, I think, is just a higher level description that helps us to explain things in cosmology.
Gives it a direction.
Yeah. And then it's just entropy. That's just, I think, what it boils down to for the most part.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fabio,
I mean, entropy gives us the direction. I think that time is a little more useful in the sense that, we dictate space. We give space a measurement, which includes a description of time in some sense. And that really helps all of our laws. I mean, I don't think there are many. I thought about this before once, many years ago now, but I can't think of any laws in physics, any classical laws in physics, that includes Einstein, that don't have a time variable in them. I mean,
right.
Yeah, I just can't think of any. So, my conclusion is that it's a necessary variable in order to describe mathematically the physical world. Obviously, when you get down to the quantum level, then things can change, and that's because of locality, where we're kind of ignoring space, right? So,
Fabio, have you anything you would like to add or a question, or did you just join and not know anything yet?
No. I mean, I followed the conversation a little bit. I'm Michael. Ciao, Simons.
Ciao.
No, it's that. So the interesting thing is that I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. I was watching a lecture by quantum gravity physicist named Carlo Rovelli. I mean, yeah. So that was super interesting. And basically, in his lecture, he dropped out something like 4 reasons why. So the interesting part is he began to describe time, as the characteristic of time. It's you can think it as a layer, it has a now, it has a before, a future and a past. It's the same for everybody. Can be measured by clock. So and the thing that he said, I'm recapping 2 hours of lecture, so bear with me. But basically he said, when we think of time, we don't actually think about time. We think about all this set of characteristics, and the funny thing is that in science, and physics, in all these very aspects, they take away things out of this set. So at the end of it, it is really complicated to say what exactly time is, and he proceeds to make 4 points. I'll be just super brief about them, but the first one is the first point is the problem with general relativity. It says that time varies with the speed. So now you don't have a common time. You take 2 watches, one up, one down, the one up, goes faster, it has more time. So that's the first, brick that goes down. The second brick that goes down is, what is the now? The now, it's really problematic. I mean, there is a now for me and a person close to me, because we can perceive that now, but it's very local. If I speak with somebody on Jupiter, it's 4 hours, it takes 4 hours. Now I can compensate. I can say, my now his now will be my now 4 hours from now. Okay, so you can try to compensate, but then maybe that guy is going really fast, so my 4 hours become 10 years for me. So again, it doesn't make any sense to speak of a now unless it's something really local, and it's basically it's the delta that we can perceive things approximately happening in the same at the same instance. The third point was what is the difference between the past and the future, and basically said that the only thing which defines past from the future, there is no other science other than thermodynamics which can make that distinction, and it's based on entropy. The problem with entropy is that Boltzmann said, that entropy, it's not an objective quantity, but it's statistical, basically. It measures how mechanical things are order or disorder. You can infer it. But it is, okay, I cut to the chase, let's make an example. You can take a box, okay, red balls from one side, green balls from the other side. You look at them and you see order, right? If you have a friend which is colorblind, he won't see the order. For him, it would be a high state of entropy. But maybe that guy can see small, the variation of the dimension in the balls. So for him, the order would be something completely different from you. So again, this concept that it is true that in the future entropy goes on. Apparently, it was slower in the past. We got to be super careful because again, it's a statistical approximation of what we define as order, and it's not said that is the de facto tool by which we can measure past from the future. It's what we perceive. It's very handy, but again, we got to be really careful about that. And that is something I think there was some philosopher which were into that, but fuck me if I can remember any name of them. The fourth point is something which has to do about the quantum properties of gravity. Basically, said that in those equations, there is no variable about time. There is no time at the quantum level. So, again, deal with it. So, yeah. So this is why I joined in because, funnily enough, I watched that thing like literally 2 days ago, and then you guys were talking about time and said, you know what, I'm going to chime in.
You hang around with Simos, and I guarantee you he's been poking your mind or dropping hints that this has been happening for at least 10 days. So you've been sitting and just go, oh yeah, Simon said something about time. I'm gonna watch that. He's been lying. No.
Listen, me and Simons, we've been dealing for about a week with another moronic theory. We absolutely haven't talked about it. I will not even start talking about that. It was, something completely bonkers. So yeah.
Yeah, something we could talk about later with Michael, perhaps, because it was on moral theories.
We've been killing Nazis.
No, it's all right. You just go and have your own show. I just sit in the corner.
No. Me and Samus, we've been killing Nazis for a week and Americans occasionally, and talk about that stupid, in a game. Yeah, I mean it was a game,
okay.
So yeah.
In the game.
So, you got some Russians too every so often.
Okay, so I'd just like to hear what Michael. Do you have anything? Just respond to that. I mean, it's pretty much what we'd already come to say.
Well, I mean, first things first. Ravelli is probably one of the. I think I literally have every single one of his books. So I would highly recommend Carlo Ravelli. He wrote one of the books that relates most to this topic is called The Order of Time. I posted it in the chat box there. He's not only is he a brilliant physicist, but he's also a excellent writer, like very, very clear, which is kind of hard to come by. But
I'll also add, he also was the lead scientist on the LHC when they discovered the Higgs boson as well.
Yeah.
Just to put that out there.
Well, so, the only thing I was... No, I'm sorry.
So, well, I mean, just to say, he's not just a brilliant scientist, he's also a brilliant
I've put a link in the chat for the Royal Institution with Physics and Philosophy of Time with Carlo Rovelli from the Royal Institution of London. I've put the link for that in the chat.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll check that out.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, and I like to insist on this dynamic just because it's what I've spent the last 6 years of my life studying and writing about, is that I want to stress how there's a French philosopher that I kind of specialize in. His name's Gaston Bachelard, who's writing in reference to Henry Bergson. And this is kind of what the whole Bergson-Einstein debate was about. Bergson believed that that description of time that you just gave, is it Fabio, that you just gave, Bergson thought was so foreign to our basic intuition about time that that's why he rejected it. Like that was a big reason why he didn't accept it, because it's so like distant from how we experience time on a daily basis. But one of the points that Bachelard makes, just to kind of highlight what you were saying, is that that description of time at a quantum level that you were just describing, what he wants to point out is that it's really no different from how we experience time. And that the time, as in you asked me what is time to start off with, time is from our perspective, psychological perspective, is actually much more flexible in that regard. So like there is no psychologically concrete order. Time is just like the story that we tell ourselves, about who we are. But the kicker is that story is very changeable, right? And so even though there was a concrete order that things happen, right? I was born before I became a teenager, right? That's indisputable. But the meaning that we make from that story and the experience of the events that I had during that time period that I was alive are very much so open to interpretation.
Right.
And we'll always be open to interpretation.
Oh, I'm totally with you. I mean, the fact that I think that the fact that science, all of it, right? I mean, depending on which branch you take, they describe and deal with time in a different way. And funnily, I mean, and it's not to say that they deal it in a different way that we do, and it's completely alien, because most of what they find, it's just a direct repercussions on things that we use, right? But I think that the way they see time, and every branch of science sees time a little bit different than the other one. Sometimes there's some major difference, but it becomes sketchy at a certain point. That doesn't mean that the perception that we have of time is wrong, right? I mean, I don't recall who said that. I read it somewhere. It says basically in the way that we perceive time might be because of the way that our brain works, right? So for some reason, because of the fact that our brain is built like that, we just give different way to things that apparently is they've happened in what we call the past and stuff like that. It would be super interesting, for example, to understand if that's true for all the animals. I don't know. I mean, there might be an animal whose brain doesn't perceive time as we do. It becomes really difficult to ask, of course. Well, I mean, you can ask,
Well,
I mean, yeah.
This brings up a an interesting example, one which I've personally had, which is like when the way we experience time is, as you say, completely variable. And that's, when we get into hyper stressful situations, our brain seems to receive a lot more information and take notice of a lot more information. And that process then means that we are judging time in a different way. We're perceiving time in a different way because we're not used to that much information flooding into our brain in order to be able to respond to it. And so we really feel that time slows down to such a point where you can feel like a second go by in what seems like a minute almost. And that shows you, I think that really demonstrates very clearly that the way we perceive time is more important than the way time moves itself.
I think to make an analogy in that, like I've had the odd car accident. And if anyone's ever been in a car accident, using the phrasing that Simos just used, time does seem to slow down. An analogy I've used before when talking to people is it's as if your brain takes a screenshot and it's like 70 frames a second. And then when you're having an accident, you double to 140 frames a second. So you're getting all that information and time seems to be moving slower for you. So it gives you time to react. You're getting more information so that your body can defend itself. But it genuinely feels that just time does seem to slow down. Like.
Yeah.
But there is another interesting aspect I think, Samus was touching by. And again, I'm not aware of any, but I would be super surprised if there were no papers about how children perceive time way differently than adults. Because I think it's a common experience, or maybe I'm just weird. Maybe.
I have a theory on this.
When I was a kid, I mean, there was some things that they took like fucking forever.
Well, they
were way more intense. It seems to be that from the age that I remember, like something from 10 to 16, let's say it was 6 years. I'm 57. Those 6 years, to me, in my recollection, they seem to be like 600 years compared to the other 47.
Well, I have a theory for that, so, Fabio, taking into consideration that as you get older, our brain can't do shit as much. If you think of your brain, we get older, we get slower. If you let me
check out my theory first. I think this is the one that explains it.
Okay, I forget. This is Amos's channel.
Yeah,
go on ahead.
Please. Just to say, I know shit, but check this out. When you are 1, all right, 1 year is your entire life.
Oh, you're stealing what I was about to fucking say as well.
When you're 50, 50 years is your entire life. And so that explains why every year you go by, it seems to get a little bit quicker and quicker. Because actually what we're doing is we're trying to remember our entire lives. Every day we get up, we reboot the mind and, in some sense, reboot. Go ahead. No, you get the idea anyway.
No, I get it. I mean, but I was actually trying to tie, that perception that I think we all had to the fact that I said before that maybe time, the way we perceive time, is because our brain is built like that. Yes. So if that's true, there might be the case, and again, I'm talking totally out of my ass here, but it might be the case that when you're younger, your brain is not either completely formed, the complexity is a little bit less than in the adult time, and that might be one of the reasons why the perception of time is totally different. I don't know, but again, this is totally out of my ass. So,
okay.
So I want to jump in real quick with two things. One is a little quip that is sometimes attributed to Einstein. I've never looked it up to verify, there's a lot of phony Einstein quotes floating around on the internet, but the quote goes to explain this difference in time perception. Set your clock to 1 minute and stick your hand on a hot stove and tell me how fast or slow time goes. And then set the clock for 1 minute and sit next to a pretty girl and tell me how fast time goes, right? So the idea is that depending upon our experiences, this is rooted, and this is not just like, us just sitting around chatting about it. Like there's psychological experiments that verify this. When you talked about being in a car wreck, when that adrenaline kicks in, when fight or flight happens, we experience time slower. Like that's a universal thing. Versus where if I'm in my, if I'm sitting at my desk job and I'm sitting there staring at the clock, that second hand seems to move an awfully lot slower. And the second thing I was going to point out, and I can't cite the study off the top of my head, but Fabio, I think you're, this is also something that's been documented in terms of some surveys that we've done, but you're absolutely right. Children do tend to experience time much slower than adults. I don't know if we have like a concrete reason for why that is, but it's definitely something that does happen. Yeah.
Can I explain my theory now? My idea
well, let me just say something quickly.
Motherfucker!
No, I'm joking.
Oh, he lost his internet. Oh.
Have your time. Go on, have your time.
As I was explaining, whenever our body jumps into that moment when we're having a fight or flight, we're having a car accident or something like that, our frame rate, to use that analogy in the run with it, jumps from say 70 to 140. That's at our age, that's at our bracket. You know, poor Simos is only getting 50 frames a second because he's a wee bit older than me. You go back to a child can pick up 80 and 90. You know, because their brain is firing better, it's more efficient, it has less information and worries and shit and all the rest of it going on in its head. So a child only has to experience the moment in that time. You know, it's not worrying about the bills, it's not doing that. So its brain is giving full function to what's happening in the moment. So it's taking more screenshots. So for a child, they're experiencing something that we would only get with a car accident. Then as we get older, as Simos stole my thunder, our daily percentage of what, you know, our days become a smaller percentage every day of what our overall life is. So they become less and less important. Your 5 and 6 every day is, you know, you've only experienced less than fucking 2,000 days on this planet. You know, it's very small amount of time, so your brain can give that attention to it. But when you get older and you're worried and things going on, and your brain has developed in certain directions, so it's donated 20% of your time to worrying about this and 20% of your time to remembering work stuff, so it can't give that full 100% to taking screenshots. And yeah, now I sound mundane and stupid because you all give a bit of that, but there you go.
Okay, can I just redirect the conversation, if I may, Michael? To ask you a few questions about the history of science.
Can I also say before he does that, I've put the link in the chat. It's a pinned tweet. We have up to 9 people can join, so if anyone else wants to jump in and can be polite, come on ahead, you know.
Okay, so, you know, it's related still, and I want to delve into the history of science through using time. And the first stop I'd like to make is not Einstein, because I think we've covered a little bit of that. But really, it's I want to talk about steam engines and steam power, and how the theory of steam was conquered, if you like, in science, and what relationship that has with time, if you like. So do you want to maybe give us some ideas about how people conquered steam, as it were, or realized that steam was science realized that steam was a power to be harnessed, and then how they harnessed it in such a way to make it usable and efficient towards powering the Industrial Revolution. So.
Well, he's making notes and Fabio walked out, so I don't know where this is going.
Well, it's probably going to go nowhere.
I'm sorry. I'm going to make a gin and tonic, but I got Bluetooth, so I keep listening. So fuck you.
Okay, so don't say anything that will make him come back to the microphone.
Yeah, I'm afraid as far as steam power and energy goes, as far as the mechanics of it, I don't. You're really pushing the extent of my background information.
Okay,
I could talk
I'm
a
really
little bit.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I could talk a little bit about the Industrial Revolution as a whole, and the roles that really practical technologies such as steam engines and trains played, and how Einstein developed his idea. But yeah, as far as the science behind like how the steam engines work, that's a little above my pay grade, right?
Okay. Okay, well, I mean, needless to say, it was mathematics and developing a statistical theory of energy, which really pushed the efficiency of steam power to a point where it was usable on an industrial scale. So that's really where I was going with it, the idea of stochastic reasoning in science. But you know, if you want to talk about how Einstein came to his conclusion, that would also be quite fascinating.
Well,
or some of the influences that Einstein was dealing with.
I mean, I think historically, some of the things that I would point to, there's a lot happening at the turn of the 20th century that influenced Einstein. First and foremost, you're absolutely right. The advent and the beginning of industrialization, which affected science by the ability to produce very precise and sophisticated scientific machinery. But on a more practical day-to-day type level, the need to develop timetables for all these trains that were going back and forth. And the fact that these trains were traveling such distances between these towns, and please don't quiz me on English geography. I won't even attempt to, but if you got a town that's a couple of hours away from London and they're operating on one time and then London's operating on its own time, the practical necessity to ensure that the clocks are the same, for obvious reasons, you could see why that would be important. So technological development absolutely plays a huge role in this. And of course, the biggest historical influence, there's kind of two dominant ideas of time that are floating around in the 19th century. You stop me if I'm going too in the weeds here.
Oh, you've got me thinking about something. I just can't remember the exact name of it, so I'm Googling, so you talk.
So the first is, of course, Newton's idea of time. And Newton's idea of time was of an absolute time, that the time of the observer is the same no matter if that observer's on Earth or if that observer's in a distant galaxy, right? The time is universal. So this idea of absolute time, and that influenced philosophers because it's from Newtonian absolute time that we get what we call now the A theory of time, which is that the past is a real, distinct, ontologically real thing that happened, and that we are now in the present. The past exists, but the future has yet to exist because we haven't gotten there yet. That was rooted in Newton's idea of absolute time. And the wrench that's kind of thrown into this is the 18th, 19th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant, who brings up the point that Fabio brought up earlier. I think it was Fabio, I could be mistaken, that time is also heavily dependent upon our brain, and that our perception of the world influences how we view and understand time. And this was Kant's big thing, that there are certain basic categories that our brain imposes on reality, one of which is time. So this is what Einstein, amongst other scientific issues, mainly light, but this is kind of the area that Einstein stepped into and that he was wrestling with when he come up with his ideas about time. But yeah,
and you can see that then, because as you say, with Newton, I believe he thought that light was instantaneous, light traveled instantaneously. And of course, now if you put that together with Kant's idea of perception, then you can see that might lead somebody to think that light, or to doubt that idea that light did travel instantaneously. And of course, Newton's big breakthrough first was the special theory of relativity, which was describing the speed of light. So so that kind of makes sense, that there's a progression there through science.
There is. There was
using philosophy.
Shortly after Newton writes his book on, well, he writes his Principia, which gives his theory of gravity. But Newton was also super interested in light. He wrote a book called Optics, in which he talks about the different features of light. He was figured out that light had different colors, stuff like that. But yeah, he thought that light, that shortly after Newton, though, I don't remember this gentleman's name. I think it's Ohm, O-L-M, or something along those lines, theorized about a speed of light, Of course, there was no way to experimentally verify any of that in the 17th century, but it would progress from there. And Newton also famously put forward the idea that light consisted of tiny little, he called them corpuscles, or particles. That light was primarily a particle. And so you have these two things. One, what is light? And two, if we're going to attribute motion to light, if we move away from the idea that light's instantaneous and we say that light moves, well, the logical question is, well, what is light moving through? And so this was the idea of the ether that dominated 17th, 18th, 19th century science that was disposed of by Einstein. But yeah, those are the kind of the intellectual ideas that are kind of floating around in the world at the start of the 20th century. Light, psychology, perception. Sorry.
No, not at all. It's interesting that you mention the ether there, because of course they needed an explanation as to why refraction was the case, right? Because if light traveled at the same speed of light, you wouldn't get refraction, right? But because it travels at different speeds, or because it has a speed, it travels at different speeds through different materials, and the different wavelengths of light travel at different speeds relative to each other. So Newton obviously was the first person to or to divide light up into its components, and then so he noticed refraction, and then accurately described how that happened. And then also, so you could, if you'd thought more deeply about it, right, you could have predicted from that experiment that light had a speed. The fact he didn't needed an explanation, and I guess that's why people came up with the ether. You know.
Have you heard of the thought experiment from Einstein, asking the question, can you see your reflection traveling on a train at the speed of light?
I'm not familiar, no.
It's a thought experiment where he went through, and it was the idea of, if you're traveling at the speed of light, you obviously, with perception and steam trains, this is why I thought of it, it's not completely out of nowhere, but it was the idea that, you know, you have a person watching someone traveling by alongside a beam of light, you know, so they'll see that traveling in front of them, but the person on the train is checking what they're looking like. You know, they're on their way to work, they want to make sure they're clean shaven, they're checking their reflection. Can you see your reflection on a train traveling at the speed of light? And not that it went down or anything, approved anything like that, but it sort of sent him down the route of time is relative. You know, it is all relative from each person. But yeah, that in your field and what you're thinking of, it may be something to look at. But yeah, train checking reflection on a train traveling at the speed of light.
There was a very good film, wasn't there, with Marilyn Monroe as one of the characters, and Einstein. And it's Einstein, it's Einstein explaining relativity to Marilyn Monroe.
I'll have to watch that, yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It really is good. Yeah. I can't remember the name of it or anything, but I do remember seeing it when I was quite young. So.
To just throw everything completely, into disaster and ruin it. What is your idea? Well, obviously we can prove this and it's a definite thing, but it's space-time. It's not just time. Right? It works with space. Space being everything that's fucking around us, So what is your thoughts on the idea that they work together? The fact that it is space-time, and that Simos has made the statement that we can't have he can't remember a mathematical statement that doesn't have a time component. Maths is also describing what's happening in the physical world, so it is in mathematics showing a combination of both of them. So what is your thoughts on the idea that, you can't have space without time, you can't have time without space?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone really needs to listen to my thoughts on those things. So.
That's why you're here, Michael. That's why you're here.
Go read Ravelli. I mean, he's, I mean, so this is, I can't remember the gentleman's name. That was, I think he may have been one of Einstein's teachers. It starts with the M. German physicist, mathematician. That helps Einstein to come up with. Anyway, yeah, I think this is one of the implications of general relativity, is that space and time are interwoven like the fabric of a blanket. And how my college, not physicist, physics instructor explained to us, he had us hold out people hold out the four ends of a little sheet, and he put like a little a ball in the center of it.
Yeah.
And of course the ball, bends the sheet down. That what Einstein's saying about how the universe is structured is a similar sort of picture, that objects with a lot of mass, such as the sun, bend space-time. But the interesting part about 20th century physics is that quantum mechanics gives us a slightly different picture. And so there's a really live question in quantum mechanics that I'm not even going to attempt to answer because I can't even touch it with a 50-foot pole. And that's what is space, right? So we've deconstructed time at the level of general relativity. People like Ravelli and other people that could actually talk about quantum mechanics are having a conversation about, well, is space something similar? And I'll just leave that at that. I can't go any.
You rambled and dodged the question. Okay, well done. Yeah.
Right.
You're a theist. That's
I
twice
think,
tonight. That's twice.
I think there is no answer. But anyway, okay. But I'm yeah. Let me just direct us back into going back in history, because that's where I think that is an interesting thing. So we talked about timetables there for the railways and the importance of developing accurate time measurements, at least in the classical sense. At least, this is before relativity, of course, so we're not talking about relativistic effects. And so this was very important in the British Empire, of course. But before that, even before trying to develop accurate timepieces to unify, the time zones, later became time zones, right? Before that, of course, it was navigation that was driving the production of time. So would you want to just fill us in on a little bit of how that happened, maybe? And the philosophical connection, that's where I'm interested. Who were the philosophers around at the time that were kind of giving some direction as to how we could use this?
Yeah. I'll just paint with some really broad strokes here, and then we can, fill in the details a little bit. But I think what you're referring to, so 16th, 15th, 16th century, sometimes you'll hear it called the age of colonialism, the age of exploration, if you want to be a little bit more romantic and whitewashing with history. But one of the things that happens is the world history, this is the beginning of modern history. And one of the characteristics of modern history is kind of an opening up. It's a globalization of humanity. And this is talking specifically about European exploration and colonialism. And one of the things that happens now, natural scientists pre-16th century had a lot of ideas about how the world was structured and kind of the shape of the earth and the whole of the earth. No one I can't say no one. By the 15th century, it was very well accepted that the Greeks had established that the earth was round and had given a general size of the earth. No one's really having is the earth flat debate. That doesn't happen until the 21st century, oddly enough. But with this idea, there's a fantastic book, and I can't remember her name, a wonderful historian. She wrote a book called Galileo's Daughter, which kind of talks about the, I can Google that, but she wrote a book called Longitude, or was it it's either Longitude or Latitude, I can't remember. But she wrote a whole book about this question. So I'll reference that. But one of the things that I think starts to happen in the natural sciences, Newton basically sets the playing field for physics. Newton is the guy to if you're going to be doing physics post Newton, you got to wrestle or contend with Newton in some way, shape, or form. But practically, sorry, go ahead.
We should also mention Leibniz in the same breath.
Yes.
Carry on. Sorry, Mike. I don't mean to interrupt.
No. But practically, what starts to happen is almost everything that Newton says is theoretical. It's mathematical. If you read the Principia, it's literally a book of equations. That's all it is. But the follow-up, what Thomas Kuhn calls the mopping up of everyday science, is developing the practical tools and techniques to demonstrate this. And so one of the practical implications is being able to map, not only to help with navigation, but to help with these sailors that are traveling to the other side of the world, to make sure they're arriving where they want to arrive when they want to arrive, right? But yeah, I don't know if you had any specific instances in mind, but
Well, I mean, there was the French and also the British were very keen to develop accurate timepieces, because by accurate timepieces you could tell where you were. As you say, I think it's latitude, isn't? Is it not? And now I'm fumbling. Yeah, so you could tell where you were on the globe roughly. You could tell how far you've travelled. How you could tell by the speed you were going if you had a timepiece how far you travelled, and that then you could plot where you were relative to the stars on the globe quite accurately. So that allowed navigation to a degree where you could replicate the journey of other people if they, had plotted a course, and obviously that allowed you to realize or to arrive in North America rather than South America, which was quite a key thing. Okay, because traveling the globe is not easy, and same with going the other way. Right. So the point is, you could sail out into mid-ocean and still know where you were, and that really allowed the globalization and allowed the empires, the Spanish, Portuguese, and British Empire, to really flourish. So I think that the timepieces, and there were very hefty rewards by the kings and Royal Society, especially for people who could develop accurate timepieces that could travel on a ship.
Yep.
So, I mean, this was a very, very serious thing that people understood was going to make a lot of money for whoever managed to do this first. So again, time and the development of timepieces is crucial, absolutely crucial in taking us into the modern world. Like philosophers like Leibniz, of course, are responsible for pushing that forward, but not just Leibniz, other philosophers as well. And I'm thinking, possibly of Rousseau, and I'm thinking possibly of Hume and Locke, obviously being the forefathers of the analytical kind of approach, shall we say. Although strictly themselves, they may not be counted as analytical philosophers. So yeah, that would be my kind of take on it. I mean, before that, we must also give a mention to Galileo, who noticed the effects of the pendulum. Okay, which is something which allowed people then to start thinking about how to create a regular timepiece. Okay, so him noticing that the frequency of a pendulum is consistent regardless of the length.
False news was happening for
What?
Nothing.
No, I haven't. I haven't. No, I haven't.
But he's right. I mean, Galileo was kind of, well, I wouldn't say obsessed with time, but it was something that he understood. It was very important, especially I mean, we consider him as the father of the scientific method, and of course, it's really difficult, to reproduce an experiment without the proper amount of time. Not only the pendulum. I mean, it was the first one, to figure out on the inclined plane, that the ball, takes the same amount of time depending on where it is and the distance difference. So that was actually a very big crux of the guy, I think. But now I'm really going by my very, very bad memory. But he had some part of his life was trying to develop, proper tools in order to measure time. He made, like the water clock, or so. I mean, if you go that route of reproducing an experiment, especially those kind of experiments, a proper tool to measure time, it's super important. I mean, how else can you say, oh yeah, the pendulum is always the same, it takes all the same time, it doesn't depend on the length. Yeah, how the bloody hell do you measure that time, right? So he had a lot of escamotage and things. I think one involved I think it was Galileo. He had something like of a song that he was singing in his mind with a very exact tempo, so that he could measure, the on inclined plane and this stuff. I mean, it makes you laugh now, and rightly so. But hey, I mean, you don't have any kind of watch over there, so you gotta make watch. I mean, you gotta you gotta fuck with DQM, So there you go.
Was it? I think it was actually a scientific thing on movement of planets or whatever, but it was talking about our perception of time and our regular. If I put a set of lights in front of you, and I set a pattern of lights like this, you'll see it okay, and it's grand, and after a wee while you might remember it. But if I did sounds, if I created a pattern, like people remember tunes and music easier than they're going to remember a set of lights. Our visual acuity, would that be the right word? Our visual acuity and remembering patterns is easier in sound than it is visual. So it's a perception of time that's just individual to each person. But remembering a pattern and remembering syncs and how things move is easier done in sounds over visuals. I think I read something on that.
Yeah, sorry, do you want to mention who that is, just to correct my mistake? And anyway, for me, Michael, in the side chat, you've put the book name.
Oh yeah. That was just a book I was trying to think of. The historian, and I might be mispronouncing this, Davia Sobel. I would recommend all of her books. Just go. Her book Galileo's Daughter is absolutely fantastic. And her book on longitude, although I have not read it, if it's anything like the rest of her work, I'm sure it's great too. Just through my head.
Yeah, just to
That's
point
gravity.
out.
Gravity's that thing we just can't rid of it. Can't get rid of it. But.
I don't. So Galileo's daughter is. I'm not sure. Was it a stepdaughter?
She was. So the what he's talking about is the first. I mean the oldest daughter, and she was a nun, Suor Maria Celeste. Yeah. So.
Yep.
Okay. Could you say that a little slower for me, please?
Suor. Okay. Suor means nun. So it's the title, Suor Maria Celeste.
Maria Celeste. Okay.
Yeah.
Ciao, mia compagna tifosi. Okay.
Is there
And,
anything... Go on ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really think Galileo is super interesting, and I was just going to shame Fabio for not being Italian and not knowing every single aspect of Galileo's life.
Okay, I'll tell you one aspect of Galileo.
You started it.
Now you started it. You won't be able to stop it. So I live in Tuscany, right? So, and I live in a part of Tuscany where there used to be all city-states. Now in Tuscany, all major cities, they all hate each other, and that goes in the 1500 because they were actually waging war to everybody. So people from Florence hate people from Prato, people from Pistoia hate people from Empoli, people from Pisa hate people from Livorno, people from Lucca hate now there is one city that everybody hates, and it's Pisa. and the fucker was in Pisa. The fucker being Galileo. So it's like 20 kilometers from where I live. So I can actually visit, it's not in the church, it's in the Battistero, so where they got the baptism of the people, where there is the pendulum, and it's super cool. I gotta give it to you. It's one of those things, when you read, books and stuff like that, and then you can actually go in the place and see the thing. It's goosebumps all the way around. It's really super fascinating, and I'm extremely lucky to live in a country where you can actually go and see and actually see the territories change a little bit, but you can have a pretty good idea of what Vinci is not far from where I live. It's about an hour and a half. I can go there and see the house of Leonardo da Vinci, which for an engineer is like getting. It's like if you were a carpenter and you're going to visit Saint Joseph. It's the same thing, right? I mean, that is the godfather of engineers, and you go there and you see the thing, and I can guarantee you it's goosebumps all the way. So yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add really briefly what you were saying about Galileo. One of the things that's easy to forget, Galileo, made all of these fantastic contributions. In the history of science, one of the things that he really pushed for um, was the practical application of science. So Galileo, prior to uh, the advent of modern science, if you look back at um, education at the university level in Europe in what we would call like the Middle Ages, um, mathematics is really big. So they're really into like the theoretical understanding of things. And then, of course, it's the Middle Ages. Theology was really big. But things like mechanics and engineering were actually seen as like uh, stuff for people that couldn't understand theology to go do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, it's kind of kind of flipped.
Yeah.
But in the Middle Ages, things like, even very practical stuff like bridge building. Now, there was a special spot reserved for like architects who were able to build something like a cathedral, but it was still seen as like lesser than. But Galileo was one of the first people to really like challenge and critique that assumption and say like, no, like there are very practical applications of things, of these mathematical formulas that we're talking about that we can put to like good practical use. And so he would train his students, and also with that an emphasis on experimental verification, which was not like too big at that time. So
I mean, but there is another super interesting thing I think about Galileo in itself is that the story of Galileo, as you know, is commonly known. It's a little bit more complicated than that, first of all. But there is a thing which is not really often talked about Galileo. So at the time, there were two big center of power. One was the church, and by center of power I mean either political and economical power. So there were the church, and then there were the single prints, in Florence, in Venice, and all that stuff. So if you wanted to do stuff, you really had to get to those people and show them, what you could do. This is what happens, in Venice with the telescope, which he actually got from Holland, but he actually proved it. So he used that and he got money. And actually, Galileo was quite a greedy person. He wanted to. I think he when he went to work for Venice, he wanted to be elected as a professor in theology and because he was getting a shitload of money about that. So it was it was a kind of a cool cat at the time, but kind of greedy, and it wasn't an idiot. So he knew that he had to feed himself. But what I want to say is that he didn't disdain to actually, and I think he was the first to actually build a bridge in science between the not religious part and actually the church. He had amazing conversation with a pope that I think it was I can't remember the name of the pope, but he had amazing conversation, and they are in books. And by the way, the books that Galileo wrote, they are. I'm sorry, because you don't read Italian, but they're fucking fantastic. He was a very good writer, very good, now it would be a very, like Carlo Rovelli, it would be someone that you actually listen to, because he was really good at communicating this concept. And he had major conversations with the Pope at the time, in the garden, in the Vatican, talking about physics, talking about the tides, talking about the fact that systems are local. So there was the experiment made passing the water in a ship which was going, so you can pass the water so it's not sloshing depending on the speed. So it was kind of a relativity at the time, a small one. One of the funny things is that on one major thing Galileo was wrong and the Pope was right. It was about the tides. Because I can't remember who was saying, it's the moon. No, it's not the moon, it's rotation. But actually the Pope was right. But he actually built that bridge, and and after that, the church changed a lot of its attitude towards science. This is where I think later on the astronomical observatory in the Vatican was built, as an institution, which sprout, people like, I can't remember the name of the guy, but he was a priest, which fathered, the Big Bang Theory and all that stuff. So
Lemaitre.
yeah, so it was a starter of things that we can only see now, and that's an aspect that it's not really well, it's not widespread about Galileo.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I think, please correct me, Fabio, if I'm wrong. Wasn't Giordani Bruno one of his
Bruno
students?
Giordano.
We don't talk about
Yeah.
Bruno.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
Giordano Bruno.
Michael
Giordano
gets
That was
it.
one of his
was-
students. This
Michael
is somebody
gets
who
it.
was
I literally had to
burnt
watch
at
it
the
Yeah.
stake
yesterday.
for heretical views, of course.
Yeah, I mean,
After.
it was burned in Rome. It's actually a bit funny enough. I've been there in January when I met Sam and all those guys. The hotel was really close to the square where Giordano Bruno was burned, and there is a statue that when they put the statue, the Vatican was kind of a little bit you gotta take it off, and the guy said, no, fuck you, we're gonna keep it there. And, yeah, and it was that was at the time of the big discussion about the Earth being at the center of the universe, and the sun rotates around, and so Galileo did, really nothing new, but again, it was a good bridge, in explaining those theory, and and all this, his trials, by the Inquisition and stuff like that. It was more, I would say, more like a political move rather than a proper theological move.
Yeah.
That I think is the big mistake that people make, when talking about the story of Galileo. They think, he was against the church and against. No. That's not really how it works.
Yeah. He was a
Yeah.
very religious man. There's no doubt about that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're not friends with the Pope for and turn out to be an atheist. You know what I mean? But it also interesting for me was that after he was imprisoned or house arrested, sent for house arrest, that's where the letters to his daughter really became into their own,
Yes.
because there's some really fascinating letters between the two of them, and him espousing some of his views in not maybe not fully, but at least his ideas in later life have managed to find voice through that means.
Well, the daughter was a nun, and she was one of the few persons that actually, stayed with his father up until up until he died, because he died quite old, even for the time, and he was mostly blind, because it was looking at the sun with a bloody telescope, right? So that can't be good. So
Yeah.
So yeah, and his daughter, Suor Maria Celeste, was really close to him at the end. It was writing. Yeah, it's a nice story.
Michael, let's just round up what we've kind of been saying, because there's one last thing that I want to address,
Just the
which
one.
you
just
may
the
or
one
may not
sound
know
off.
about.
Just the one.
Just one or two or maybe 10. I
Oh,
don't
no,
know.
you're going ahead.
Nope. Okay.
Okay, that was you. You dropped you out there. Okay.
I was giving
never
you the
mind.
floor. I was giving you.
Thank
the
you so much. Thank you so much. No, which is, basically the philosophical work that came in through Islam from the Greeks into Europe. And it's about this time that these works, Al-Ghazali's work, really starts getting into Europe, and the idea of the inductive method and the scientific method becomes available to Europeans. So maybe if you could just expound upon that for a little bit.
Yeah. I won't be able to tell you much about the Islamic Golden Age. Again, broad strokes here.
I'm more interested in how
Motherfucker,
it
you should have
affected
hung
the
out with him
Renaissance.
before the stream a wee bit more and asked him about these things.
No, it's okay. It's fine. No, I think this is really important because I made a video last month. There's some popular.
You type Michael's surname in the chat. It's Granado with an apostrophe at the beginning. You'll get the link to Grando's channel.
Yes. Thank you.
Granado or whatever. Sorry.
Granado, yeah. So I made a video called "Did Christianity Lead to Modern Science?" And this was largely in response to some apologetic arguments that I heard floating around by folks like Stephen Meyer, who apparently has a chapter about this in a new book that he's publishing. But one of the big problems with that argument, and the argument basically is that the reason why modern science developed in Europe in the 15th century was because of theological assumptions that it borrowed from Christianity. Why that's wrong, historically, is that it completely ignores the Islamic influence on the development of science. The scientific revolution most likely would not have happened if it wasn't for all of the advancements made during the Islamic Golden Age, which was a period of, I think it's about 600-700 years that happened in the Ottoman Empire, modern day, what we would call the Middle East. And this includes, but is not limited to, probably most famously, the development of algebra, precursors to trigonometry, advancements in geometry, medical advancements. And this is where the, I think what you were mentioning, Simos, you were asking about, phrase the first part of your question again.
Well, strictly I was asking about Al-Ghazali's critique on Aristotle's theory of induction.
Induction, okay. I will say that, so medical advances, including, and I can't remember these people's names, there's a Islamic doctor who essentially comes up with the modern medical technique of isolating patients and giving one patient this treatment, another patient this treatment, and see which treatment works the best. Kind of unethical nowadays, but back then there were no laws or rules or regulations about that. But he writes a whole book about the method that he developed. And what's happening is during the Islamic Golden Age is a moving away from classical Greek science. Most importantly, Aristotle, but also figures like Galen and Ptolemy and all that good stuff. And it's these Islamic scientists. Okay, nice segue there. It's these Islamic scientists that are really pushing that boundary. And for Al-Ghazali, I don't know a whole lot about him, but I do know that he had a tremendous influence on probably one of the fathers of modern science, Rene Descartes. Descartes was deeply, deeply indebted to Al-Ghazali, I would say.
What was the time frame for the golden age of science in the ancient Muslim world? So like,
I think it's about
700.
Yeah, so it's like 900 or 1,000, somewhere around there.
Yeah, 8th to 13th century.
There was copies, I think. I can't remember any names or any books or whatever it was, but there was certain mathematical books that were lost that were refound again when some guy went to visit an Islamic state or an Islamic country or whatever, and he then brought these back because they were lost in their libraries or got forgot about or whatever. Like,
I think when the Franks invaded Spain, they conquered the University of Cordova and took the books, or found the Muslim books. More importantly, it's the advancements that the Muslims made on Aristotle's work to show that induction was a very powerful method to understand the world or the reality, whereas Christianity had relied on deduction and Aristotle's logic. Go ahead.
So, are we saying that these scientific advancements were in Western Europe? Because I always got the impression that like Istanbul or Constantinople was like the center of the advancing science, where on the more in Eastern Europe. Is that
Baghdad? Actually, I think is where it was centered around the golden age of the.
I guess when I say Istanbul, that I mean that that's where all the conflict with where the Europeans were exposed to the advanced technologies of the Turks.
No, it's actually through Spain, as I say, That's where.
Spain?
That's yeah. It was through Spain.
Yeah, that's
The
totally different than I
Muslims conquered
thought.
Spain, and then they were reconquered in the was it late 900s, something like that. And it took some time for the works to get through, at least to be accepted. I mean,
Yeah.
all of the Muslim works were deemed to be heretical by the church, early church, and not surprising really, because they're, as you say, the forefront of scientific progress, and more importantly, the philosophy behind scientific process. So the scientific method and the process of induction being really important to understand the modern world. And that's when there's a real flowering in Europe.
I'm going to be straight
It's so
up.
wild that that gets ignored for so long because I mean we go straight from the golden age of the ancient Rome or whatever, the Roman era, and then you've got the dark ages. But that wasn't dark everywhere. China was an early, like from like 400 to about 1,000. They were on the forefront of science, and then it moved into the Muslim world, I guess you would say.
Oh, sorry, Brie, go on ahead. No, I'm just. It's
and then Europe was kind of a latecomer to the scene about the Age of Enlightenment, the Renaissance, and the Enlightenment even came much later than that. But there was Enlightenment in the Jewish world, at least to some extent, around the time of the Crusades too. So
certainly in building, but I don't think they really understood what they were doing.
You mentioned there at the start now, Michael. I'll be honest, this last 5-10 minutes I've been jumping back and forth between the live chat and stuff, so I'm trying to keep track as best I can. I know you did mention about the church and the introduction of science. Have you ever, in your argumentation with anyone on Twitter or through debates, I know that if anyone hasn't seen, Michael does do debates on that really awful channel, or has done, modern day debate. We're not even talking about it. Yeah, so he's been there, But have you ever come across, a lot of the universities in America would have started as, Christian funded. And the argument in a very basic form that I've put forth to people when this has come across to me is the idea, it's like, of course they are. They're the only motherfuckers with money. They're the only motherfuckers with control. So it's not that if it wasn't for Christianity, there wouldn't be these universities. It's if it wasn't for some big white guy with money, there wouldn't be these universities. So there's a distinction there. So could you go into like the history of that? Do you know anything about that now? Before I said do it like Simos and crack my whip, I ask you.
It's
I'm
all
just
good.
shutting up now. I mean,
Cotton Mathers.
No, you're absolutely right, and I will say, I appeared on Modern Day Debate. He recently hosted a Richard Spencer, who's I think a literal Nazi, so I will not be returning to Modern Day Debate. I think that's completely unacceptable. But so
this is theist.
Can't help it. It's a reflex that was beat into me. This is the issue with this argument that I hear, and to be clear, I don't think I've ever heard an actual historian of science make this argument, just because it's like arguing with a climate scientist that climate change is not a real phenomenon. Like the historical evidence for this is just so overwhelming. To say that Christianity was a direct cause of science is to ignore, at the most basic level, the Islamic influence, which leads me to question, like, well, why are you ignoring the Islamic? Like, what else is at play there, right? But
explain your bias.
Anyway, right?
Always show your bias, yeah.
Well, that's what, and I'll answer your question eventually, but that's what kind of irked me about Stephen Meyer's response specifically, because he kept saying, like, it's based off of Judeo-Christian principles, and it's like, if you would have included Judeo-Christian Islamic principles, like, I would have not had as big of an issue with it. But the fact that there's still, but the fact that you're intentionally leaving out the influence and the impact of Islamic civilization raises some really big red flags. But anyway, to your question, I have heard this argument, again, not from actual historians of science, that, well, it's Christianity that establishes the first universities, establishes the first institutions, and therefore it's Christianity that leads to all of this great stuff. And if you're talking about European history, yeah, but surprise, surprise, they had universities in other places that weren't European or weren't Christian. So it's kind of a mute point. And it's also kind of a mute point. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The funny thing is that if they specified about non-religious university, they might have a point. Because there were, I think the first one was one in Bologna and the other one, but they were widely recognized as the first universities because they were not sponsored by religion. Now, that they might have a point, but of course, if they say that, they undermine, the Judeo-Christian part. So they can't say that, and they have to say something which is wrong, which is super funny to me.
I mean, when we think about it, this is the one that gets me every time. The Greek schools existed before Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
They certainly existed, before the Greeks conquered all of that area of Judea, etc. Right?
Yeah.
So if anything, it's the Greeks that brought this idea to the Jews and also to the Christians. In fact, Paul specifically says he goes to Ephesus to preach, right? Now that's one of the biggest Greek philosophical schools happens to be Ephesus, So I'm just guessing that he's heavily, and we can tell through books like Titus that Paul is heavily influenced by Greek thought, and he even mentions some of the philosophical ideas. Such as the unknown God, etc., which are very, very much in the tradition of Greek thought.
Yeah, and I mean, you're absolutely right. And it's just kind of, I don't want to say silly, but it's almost an impossible claim. It would be the equivalent of me saying, well, find me a Hindu temple in Europe from the 5th to the 12th century.
Right.
Like, you're not gonna find it, but that doesn't prove anything. The reason why there weren't secular universities in Europe at that time is just because of the very practical reason of who's funding it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the case of medieval Europe, it's the church.
Yeah.
That's where the money's coming from, because they're training theologians and lawyers and writers and all that other good stuff.
And laws.
There is another
laws against being a secularist.
Right.
There is another example, in what you were saying that, I will not support this, right? But, I can understand if someone says, something on the like, well, okay, the European roots, if you really dig down, you can relate it to the Roman Empire. Then again, it's another showstopper, because one of the best things that the Roman did was just that they conquered Gallia, France. They say, okay, that's an interesting thing. We're going to bring it back to us. They had no problems whatsoever in integrating, you would say,
Tax.
Somebody
They
might
just
say
tax people.
stealing or colonizing, as the Brits did, things that were good from other countries. So again, if you follow that line of thought, you would say, okay, the European roots, they go back to, let's take everything which is good by anybody. I don't care who the bloody is, right? The Greeks, Egyptian, bloody French, stuff like that. And we just,
Random
it
question.
works, right?
Random question, joining all these sort of things that I've been talking about. It just popped into my head, right? The Roman Empire, right? We're not necessarily taking in the Huns, but the Roman Empire conquered an awful lot of the world. There was a Roman Empire, they were very large. They also had a mainstream religion. They set laws and stuff like that on what people could believe, worship and stuff. But I think that the Roman Empire grew as wide as it was, not only because they had the power of the church behind them, but that they had the ingenuity to back it up. They had the science to back it up. They built roads. They built aqueducts. They could come in and say, we are in, if you walked into a country and took it over and said, God told me to do this, and you fucked everything up, then people aren't going to like God. if you walked in and said, God told me how to do this, and you come up with technology to, even to this day, they're starting to look back into Roman concrete for underwater because it gets harder as it goes. You know, if you can back up what you're saying with the technology that goes with it. So, as Michael was saying earlier, there was that connection between the church and science. It was, we are using science to prove our knowledge of God. We're now, the knowledge of God has got so, or the knowledge of the world has got so strong, it's not the knowledge of God anymore. It's.
Are you talking about?
Well,
Aren't
if
you
you're
talking about pagan Rome, though?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the Roman Empire, there was no church involved whatsoever.
Well, the late Roman Empire.
I did this.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it depends what we're talking about.
Well, when you
I
take
mean,
over a country, you know, they can follow on. They incorporate other people. You know, it's all, fuck you then, right? I'm leaving. It's all right. Bye.
Oh,
Okay, right. So that's
so,
it.
okay.
So now I'm.
That went well.
Oh, he's back. Oh shit. No, I mean, you know, one of the things the Romans did is they let whoever they conquered, they let carry on worshipping. The only stipulation was that you had to pay tribute to the emperor as a god and make donations or sacrifices to that.
Yeah.
So they insisted that the Roman pantheon be also equally worshipped.
Yeah.
And that was the only stipulation, really.
because
The
they
other
totally
thing
got
is the
Colosseums
Romans.
all over the place too.
Say again for me, Bumble. I talked over you.
Oh, it's okay. I was just saying that's why we got Colosseums all over all over Eurasia too, because that was part of that arrangement. Is they had they were done for the emperor.
You're very badly roboting. You're very badly
Your connection is roboting, Brie, I'm
Yeah.
afraid.
Another thing is you have to have a good
I
publicist.
got up to the Colosseum
The
part, but I
Colosseum, the
missed.
gladiator battle.
Talking about the universities, and I was thinking points of culture, points of education, and everyone screams about the Library of Alexandria. About it being fantastic. I can't remember what channel it is. There's the History for Atheists, that guy that shouts, you know, and teaches atheists true history, but I don't think it was his channel anyway. But I think the Library of Alexandria actually, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Is it raided or raped or, you know, pillaged? They went round to
Many
other
times.
Yeah, after they had a big loss or this, that, and the other. You know, it wasn't for an educational purpose to put forth. It was, you know,
Oh no, it was. Yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah, it was. There was schools at Alexandria which taught and experts which were.
Oh yeah, but if you're
employed to
going and you're
teach.
pillaging and raiding another library and being really nasty about it, it's not always the nicest thing.
Well, I mean,
They took books
yeah.
when people didn't donate
Yeah,
them. They went and forcefully took them.
Well, the Christians burnt at one point. They burnt the contents, right? And what's the word I'm looking for here? Hypatia is the example.
Yeah,
I
but what I'm
bet.
looking
Yeah.
for, what I'm trying to say, it's about stature. The reason that they raided other libraries and stole their books, yes, it was for education.
Oh,
they
right, you
wanted
mean
to
that.
be
Yeah.
the best. They had
Yeah,
the
yeah, for
power.
sure.
They had the funding behind them. They had that, so they could go forth and not only just create their own stuff. We can fucking steal it from other people.
Well, they not so much steal it. The original library paid for any original Greek books, and they paid handsomely for them. But they did make a law where any ship sailing into Alexandria could be searched, and if it had a book aboard, which they didn't have, then they would forcibly take it and pay you for it.
Right? Is that true, man? Because I've heard that. I've seen
Yeah,
it in
they
memes.
would also make copies. Later on, they made copies.
Yeah,
and
what I
gave
heard
you
is
the
they
copy.
stole it, made
Did they give them
copies,
to
and
the
give the original
monasteries to
back.
make copies?
No, they had. There was a whole organisation behind the.
Yeah, they
behind
raided
it.
your
There
boat.
was a
What
lot
I
of
heard is
schools.
they raided your boat. They found the book. They would make a copy, and then you can go and get your copy. Well, your
No.
original back from the library.
No. At the beginning, they would just take the book and pay you for it,
Oh, at least
right?
they
And
paid
then
you.
later on, as the library developed over the years, they would find a book, they would make a copy of it and give you the copy.
Are we de-romanticizing the Library of Alexandria?
Yes.
Crap.
Yes.
Yeah.
we are
Well,
trying-
I mean, if you want to really de-romanticize it, I will shit on the old story, you know, but by saying that there was no no burning of the Alexandria Library on purpose.
But didn't it just
That,
slowly
that,
decline?
that was
Later there was though, but after it had been disbanded already.
Okay, so but the first one, which goes
Yeah.
back to when Julius Caesar was in Egypt. Apparently, what happened was that the port took fire, and then eventually got back to the library. They had no intention of burning the library per se. At least,
I think they tried to save the books as many as they could anyway.
They actually did, because there are documents of the Library of Alexandria after the first time that it burned. So somebody tried to save something, and then it all went downhill from there.
Yeah. Yeah, as I say, later on. I mean, also to mention the Holy Roman Empire actually closed the Greek schools. They were responsible for closing the Greek schools, of which Alexandria was the last to be closed, and it was forcibly closed.
Totally,
So,
we have so went off the topic.
That's what you said, Samus. That's exactly the reason why I specified that before to MathPig. I think that I know that when people talk about the Roman Empire, they encompass so many facets of that Roman Empire.
yeah.
So I think it's important to make a distinction about the Republic of Rome, the Senate, then the various emperor, and then after the fall and what became the Holy Roman Empire, because those are two totally different things.
Absolutely.
It's totally
when we say the Holy Roman Empire, we mean the Eastern Empire, which had its base in Constantinople. Yeah.
No, but and I understand that it might be like a cultural divide, because usually when we say the Roman Empire around here, in Italy, what you think about are the Caesars,
The Caesars, yeah.
Everything, but up until the barbarians, invading Rome, the Visigoths and all that stuff. So that is the Roman Empire. After that, it's something else.
Nope.
Okay.
Sergeant came and went. Come back, Sergeant Sam.
Exactly.
So we did get off track a little bit. We were supposed to be talking about what the theory of time, right? A theory of time, B theory of time. Most people when
Now we
talk
just
about
get into
cosmology are going to be talking B theory of time. And people are experts in the field, right? B theory of time is like space time. Space and time are intricately linked, and when you talk about the expansion of the singularity at the beginning of the so-called Big Bang, you are actually talking about expansion of time along with that. So saying before the Big Bang or before the singularity is nonsensical as saying what's north of the North Pole. So, but there is a theory of time which separates time from that completely, and time is linear, and we run alongside of it in matter and energy. But I don't know if anybody who ascribes to that seriously.
Just philosophers.
Yeah.
What would be your answer to that question?
And some scientists.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're having
Sean
a
Carroll.
conversation with someone. You're having a conversation with some. We're not going to give them a name, a flat earther or anything like that. Certain person who has the question, put forth the question to you. Sorry. What came before the beginning of the universe?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I like to dodge questions. So the first thing I would say is like, we don't know. The second part is that is it Bree? Do you go by Bree or Bumblebee? Yeah. The second part is exactly what Bree was saying, and this is kind of what I talked about at the very beginning of this stream. Once we start to apply temporal categories to things that don't relate to time, it can lead us to some logical problems. And one of the logical problems is, our current scientific understanding of the universe stops at the singularity, right?
Mathematically.
Mathematically.
Yeah,
so to ask like, well, what happened before that? I mean, the actual answer to that is we have no idea. But to then proceed to build off of that to construct some sort of argument it's a classic argument from ignorance. But it's also these categories of before or after. In the singularity, there's no time. So like that language at that point's meaningless. And to try to build up from that language, you're building on clouds there.
You see, that's the problem. You know, you can, in a mathematical form, write down this and this means this. To actually convert then into an English language to describe something is very, very difficult. It's not like you can you know, like Fabio, I'm sure, has some Italian language, Italian phrases that mean awful things that you try to translate to English and don't come across well. I work with a lot of Polish people, and if anyone speaks Polish, kurwa is supposedly like a very, very, it's like worse than asshole, worse than fucker. It's like, you know, I heard some Polish boys say, oh, you know, kurwa, yeah. It's you can't translate. It's like that with mathematics, you know, it's a loss of translation. As you say, the singularity has only been proven in mathematics. Evidentially, I think we're down to what, 10 and 23 knots after it, or sorry, 0.23 knots that we get to, and we can't get past that. So evidentially, that's what the cosmic background radiation. You know, we can't go physically any further back than that.
There is a bit of confusion here. I would like to clarify. So talking about singularity in mathematics is totally different about talking about the singularity of the universe. There are singularities in mathematics. I mean,
you're just being a pedantic asshole to make me look like a dick.
Well, no. But it's important because you can actually define a singularity in mathematics, and you can find a singularity in mathematics. I mean, the first example pops in mind is the Riemann Z function. There is a super duper singularity. I think it's a -1. You know, and that's a singularity in mathematics. We know what it is, right? It's not some bloody mystery. When we refer at the singularity in the Big Bang, we're talking about exactly what Michael said before. It's a point where all our physics theory, even the one that we can think about, they collapse and they make no sense. So we are more than justified in saying I have no idea. It might be unicorns for what we know, because there is nothing that we can relate to in our universe. That was literally pre-universe. So there is nothing that we can relate to. Trying to apply thermodynamics or whatever pre-singularity or at the singularity would be wrong. Right. Well, the smartest thing you can say about the singularity is that it was probably green. That's it.
No. The smartest thing you could probably say about a singularity is it's spherical.
No.
I don't know. No. I mean, that's another thing. It might be a unicorn for what we know, or just
You can't say it's spherical. The problem with it.
You can't say anything.
As I understand it, the problem is that it's you can't have a radius of 0.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to have a radius which is 0. So any equation which you have that has a radius in, i.e. Einstein, a theory of general relativity has a radius in it.
Okay.
It just means that every time you put a 0 in, you're going to get an infinity, and that leads to a contradiction. It just doesn't make sense to say that the singularity has any space or time.
Yeah, definitely.
No.
Hold on. No. I want to ask Michael a question before I lose this trail of thought, right?
I got to ask a question.
Simos's channel and I'm the co-host, all right? Relax.
I'm shutting up.
Michael, would you be a proponent of, under the definitions that we would use in words and language and stuff, there is the Milky Way galaxy, then you have the universe. Would you be a proponent of the cosmos? As in something bigger than that, the universe. The idea of a 6th-dimensional membrane, 2 of them colliding, creating the universe and things like that. Something outside of the universe. Totally doing thought experiments, no physical evidence. We're just talking shit for the end of the stream wee bit.
Yeah. It's fun to think about.
Now we're ignoring time, right? We'll take time out of it. Yeah. We'll leave that for question 2. But are you a proponent? Would you think that there is something bigger and outside of our universe? Not the thing we're expanding into.
Time out of it. You can't
Right.
take time out of it.
No,
I can take Brie out of it.
I would say, for all intents and purposes, philosophicically, I'm a naturalist, and what I take that to mean is that to misquote Wittgenstein here, for me, the universe is everything that is the case. Meaning that if you want to talk about like what exists outside of the universe, or could something exist outside of the universe, or what existed before the universe, those are kind of like meaningless things for me. Unless, now I'm a provisional naturalist in that I could be mistaken in my naturalism, but thus far, all of the evidence that I have seen points towards naturalism. And I would say that, to your question specifically, I don't think there is anything outside of the universe or alongside the universe or bumping up against the universe. Yeah, I would say no.
I'm not a fan of string theory.
If I can get some empirical evidence of it.
Have you not seen The Big Bang Theory? You know, he's always right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
I love me some string theory, but obviously I agree. There's no falsifiability.
Stop telling me I'm
contracted in
wrong.
it.
You're
You're
really
supposed to be my
serious.
friend
It's
tonight. You
not
just
a
made me
string
look.
hypothesis, right?
I think string theory is bullshit. I mean, the best one is Velcro theory. It's way better. Velcro is way superior than string.
Sorry,
No,
which
if you're
theory?
watching the box and I'm just gonna
Velcro theory.
Oh, Velcro.
Because Velcro is far superior than strings. So I don't know why people get stuck with it.
I think you'll find Velcro is based on string theory, but
I think Velcro was
I don't
actually
think
based
so.
on a natural
little
plant.
loops, right?
I think
So-
I've got
Velcro was
Velcro
based
shoes.
on a
There are no
plant.
strings there.
Sorry, MathPig. Go ahead.
Velcro was based on a plant.
There we go.
Fuck
You heard it
yours.
here first.
I think there was a plant that has them natural hooks where you walk past and they catch, and the guy was wearing natural wool, and he noticed, and I think that's where Velcro came from. Don't watch Star Trek Enterprise because they say it was the Vulcans, but you know, I think it was a plant. Somebody walked past it. You know, we used to play that game when we were kids, and you'd throw it at them, you know, and it would stick to their clothes, and people wouldn't know. You know that plant?
Thistles, you mean?
No,
the
not thistles.
seeds of thistles.
We call them cockleburrs
Sticky things. They're really.
or burrs.
Burrs, yeah.
This guy in the background's watching the boxing. Why the fuck did you join, Sammy? I don't know. You're watching the boxing. No. Fuck
Is
it.
it, let's ask him if he's got anything to say, because he's been on a while now.
Sammy,
Can you hear us?
Sammy, look at the screen. Mute the boxing. Right, unmute yourself. Right, there you go. What do you think about? You would like, you know,
Alon. Go ahead.
other than where the fuck did you buy that wallpaper? Is it Casino? Is it that it looks like you should be in Casino, that movie with
I am.
Oh, you are, right. How's the boxing?
Good. Right.
Yep. There you go. That was the philosophical point of the night.
No, Yusuf just won. He's Ukrainian, so I'm happy for Ukraine. But Anthony Joshua just lost. If that makes any sense to you.
No, I don't know why you joined.
No.
Makes no sense.
Is he a philosopher?
Two things I'm lost on: that wallpaper and why you joined if you're watching boxing. But I appreciate it, man. We'll keep you backstage to the after party. I know Sammy in real life. I used to work with Sammy, and then Sammy left. So now I do Sammy's job, right? Because they moved me to his department, so I literally took over what he does, and it's fuck that shit. I don't know how he works. Stop the guy.
Okay.
Rambling.
So to get us back on a little bit of tracking, I guess. Are we looking for a wrap up here? MathPig?
Yeah, well, I
Is
was
that what
thinking
you're
another 10-15 minutes, and then we can do
Okay,
an actual.
okay.
No, we'll do an after party because this conversation I think
Sure.
has been very good and should be kept separate. If we're all going to start talking shite, and Sammy's going to
Yeah,
be doing
we can
this
talk shite if
backstage
you
when
like,
someone misses a swing, we should maybe make it an after party.
How long does it take to have a good shite?
Depends. How big is your shampoo bottle? If you have a small shampoo bottle, you're done in about a few minutes.
Jolly good.
Yeah, see, you ruined it. I ruined it.
I did, but that's okay. I'm used to ruining things. So
And
that's all right.
our great leader, hands up to the camera.
like
our great
a
leader
good
has just
orgasm,
turned up.
I'm used to ruining it.
Our great leader has just turned up.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah. Funny story. If anyone has noticed in the chat, Emma's the new girl. Emma's Time Matters. We came up with this name like a week ago. Not even that. A couple of days ago, she was in one of the night, and it was her time matters. I pointed for this. Everybody's time matters. Everybody's time is relative.
Some would say matter determines time. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, you took it to the next level. I was going to say, well,
I
define
did.
matter, and then I was like, oh no, he already has. That's that physical thing we're all made up of. Yeah.
Okay,
It's
so
been full circle because B theory tethers matter to time. So
exactly where I was going with that, but that's cool. That's cool.
I have one joke to make.
Oh dear.
Oh no, it's funny because it's at Michael's expense. Has anyone? Oh no, you'll love this, man. Has anyone seen the meme, the whiteboard meme, the guy in front of the map where it's like all red strings and shit? You know, he's got the whiteboard. Do you know that there? Do you know Michael has like 6 thumbnails from like 5 years ago on his channel where he's exactly that? I was just sorry, Michael.
No, it's okay. I accept that fully.
I was going to like look at these things.
That's it. Yep.
You know, you go from
Fantastic.
that to that. Like, look at this one. What's going on here, man? What is Neolithic revolution, and why has it got you doing this?
I talk with my hands a lot. Yeah, I can't help it.
me too.
Yeah,
Okay.
The Neolithic Revolution is
I think it's this
interesting,
one.
I can assure
That's
you.
the one that just is perfect. It's
Farming,
just
is
standing
it?
out of the
Maybe?
ties, just like-
Is that your main area, the Neolithic?
Oh no.
We've got
no,
ancient China.
My main area is history of science. That's just I have to teach general history classes, and I recorded some of my lectures. Yeah.
These are 5 years ago. So we've got Egyptian religion from 5 years ago. We've got the history of electricity from 5 years ago. So there's
I was a lot skinnier and had more hair back then. So
I like your shirts, man. I like your shirts. You know.
thank you.
The red one's very. I like this one. You know, I like. We've got Buddhism. We've got Judaism. We've got the Age of Discovery. We've got Nazi ideology. There's a lot of information and skills on this channel. There's a lot of stuff that we need to go watch, and yeah. I've watched, as you can
That's
see,
an
I've
interesting
watched.
picture. Would you like to tell us about that picture at the top, Michael?
Oh, the School of Athens. Yeah, classic. All the classic philosophers represented there. And I think
And
El
is
Ghazali's
that-
in there too. Yeah.
Is that Da Vinci? Is it Leonardo? No, not
Raphael.
Michelangelo.
I think. If I'm not, it's either Michelangelo or Raphael. It's one of the
Oh, it could be
Ninja
Raphael,
Turtles.
yes.
Yeah.
I think it's whoever it is. He put himself in it, so it's probably the Italian guy.
Yeah.
It was
Bad
Raphael.
one.
I just
It was Raphael, was it? Okay.
yeah, I just gave you a little bit of time. See, I mean, maybe somebody will get it. Somebody did. So yeah.
I mean, we have our expert here.
Renaissance art is like way over my head.
There we go.
I do have a-
Fantastic. And those
I do
two
have a
main
question.
characters are
Plato and Aristotle. Yeah.
Plato and Aristotle. There we go.
Yeah, Plato pointing up to the forms, right? The ethereal conception of reality, that the world that we experience is just a shadow, illusion of the real world, and Aristotle pointing down to the concrete, the physical, the idea that, you know, as far as the ethics, Plato's ethics centered in the next world, Aristotelian ethics centered in this world. Yeah.
Okay. Fun fact. Do you know where that painting is?
I don't.
It's a fresco, but you know, do you know where it is?
Vatican?
Yes.
Of course.
It's in the
They
Vatican.
have all the good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you
They could
Dave
have ordered-
McDonald?
Presumably
I mean-
sponsored. Presumably sponsored by the Medicis.
No. It was commissioned by a pope. It's in the Vatican, so it was commissioned.
They're
by
not
a pope.
mutually exclusive, just to say.
No, but it's interesting that the Pope calls Raffaello and commissions him, a painting with with Greek philosophers. I think that tells a lot of things about, there's some really weird misconceptions about, the role of the church in the Renaissance in Italy and stuff like that. And yeah,
it took them quite a long time to kill.
Okay, so we are again
Michelangelo.
rambling like rambling motherfuckers. We're like the Irish people with nothing to do in the summer and just going through the fields rambling. Michael, shill your channel. Tell everyone how fantastic you are. Again, if you don't mind me asking, we're abusing you tonight, so I want you to shill your PhD candidate and tell everyone how smart you are. Go.
Well, I've been an educator for about the past 10 years. So my YouTube channel is primarily educational content. I interview some academic. I interview some academics, some YouTubers, professionals. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I got lectures on ancient world history, modern world history, all that good jazz. And I appreciate y'all having me. Let me come here and talk about time and history and philosophy and all that good stuff. Y'all have been very hospitable and really awesome. Thanks again.
Again, I'm going to shout out, in my opinion, it's a channel I'm going to link. You are literally exactly what, I'm looking, exactly what me and Simos have been talking about. We had them. I'm looking people who are well educated, who actually have some sort of scholarship, who aren't just fucking trolls on the internet. Hi Wesley. Or, just someone who can actually back up what they're saying and knows what they're talking about and appreciates people being real. Because we do talk shit here, we do ramble on, we do tangent, And I've laughed and have deliberately not mentioned this, but has everybody seen the paint on the back of Michael's hand tonight that he didn't get off in the shower?
Yeah.
Proof he's contracted and doing the house up. I've loved it, man. It's real. You're here, and I really appreciate taking the time. Like you've spent, as you said, 10 years educating. So you're probably 15 years to 20 years learning, and you're taking that big chunk of your life, which is very unimportant now because we're all that, as we discussed earlier, it doesn't matter. But you're sharing that with us. And I really do appreciate that. And more so than anything, you reached out. I didn't fucking torture you. I'm not sure, I might have followed you on Twitter or whatever, but you reached out to me, Michael. So I do appreciate the fact that, you can see what we're trying to do here. You can see that we're trying to, help people think skeptically and realize what life is and not just drive through it, paying your bills, making a job and all. Actually sit down and think. Realize your life. If you can be better, we can all help each other out. And now I'm rambling. Put your nails away. You distracted me.
I'll just say something else. I'll say something else there. Which is to say, I'd want to thank Michael very much for this stimulating conversation. And of course, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Just spend 20 minutes saying that. Why does yours sound better? You make it.
I'm a professional. That's why.
Y'all are too kind. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I hope we can do it again sometime, Michael.
Absolutely.
Because it's
Let me
been
know.
amazing. And there's so much more yet to cover. So
this is the open panel. We have the interview
subjects
yet to come.
So I think we can get in depth a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we should do an episode of mastermind style questions where we just throw shit at Michael for like 25 minutes, 30 minutes. What do you think, Simos?
Yeah, okay.
I think that could be fun.
Can I do the theme tune?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Will you do it
excellent. I'll do
topless
the
with
theme
your guitar on that sofa behind you?
Yeah, fine, no problem.
You're very privileged, Michael. He put a top on tonight.
I did, yes.
Simos usually goes topless. Very warm over here at the minute, like that. Yeah, Michael, thank you very much. Simos, thank you everything that you're helping me.
Yeah, thank you, MathPig. Thank you, Fabio. Thank you, Brie.
Thank you hugely for your honesty, your questions, your approach, and your notepad with all your little things that you write down. Not listening now. Oh, he is.
I'm listening. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, obviously sub to the channel Fabio and Funk. Of course.
Fabio and Funk. There is a command that I can't remember. Okay, I should have made it Simos because if you do the bot command Simos, it just comes back girth. Okay.
Really?
It's 'cause,
Yeah.
Really?
Simos,
that a
can you
boat?
give us your definition of God, please?
Oh, if I have to. Okay, this happened in a debate with somebody, and I said, "What's the definition of God?" And they didn't know. So I said, "Look, I could say the definition of God, of course, is someone who's 5'8", plays mean guitar, aggressive licks, long hair, and has big girth, and is called Simos." And that's one definition of God you could use. In which case, I'm a theist.
But that's why if you type Simos into the bot commands, it just comes back with girth. But yeah, that's what we're like here. We like the truth. We like honesty. We also like having these conversations. And
Except for the girth thing, we don't know if that's objectively true.
I'm okay with not knowing. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Genuinely thinking of moving the after party to the Patreon only channel. I don't know where this is going now.
Okay. I think we should just end it there. It's a strange definition of God, but one which I think is not exactly true.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
Fighting mantis. Think for yourselves, people. Don't believe a goddamn thing any of us said. We're all full of shit. We're all just wankers on the internet.
I'm not full of shit.
There will be a stream on Tuesday with Rich. Sorry, what was that?
In my opinion, you are.
There'll
In
be a
fact,
stream with
let
Richard.
me just,
There'll be a
I
stream
could
with.
quote Fabio's law here to show
Yes.
that you're wrong.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
What were you
All right.
saying?
Well, yeah.
You finished, Amos? Can I
That's it.
talk now? Yeah.
No, we're done. I finished.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no stream next week. I've got a thing to do, so there'll be no stream next Saturday. There will be Richard on Tuesday. Come back, watch me scream at him and scream Alien Overlords. It's fun. It's good night. Always come back. Thank you, Michael. Thanks, everybody. And yeah,
Appreciate it.
think for yourselves, people. Where's the button?